Okay, so this is a video on how to use an oxalic acid vaporizing wand. So what is it? Oxalic acid is an organic compound often found in a lot of fruits and vegetables, well, mainly vegetables, your brassicas especially, your broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, that sort of thing. So it can be used if you are an organic beekeeper. The wand is generally a 12-volt powered wand. Power supply goes up here to a heating element based in here. You've got a bowl where you put the oxalic acid, you insert it into the hive, and as it heats up, it vaporizes the crystal powder and sends that vapor right through the hive to treat the hive for mites. Pros and cons of using a vaporizer. It's cheap. While the vaporizer itself is not cheap to buy, in New Zealand this 300 gram tub costs $6. In the US it's probably about $5 a pound to buy oxalic acid, and it can be used in a number of ways. This is just one way of treating mites with oxalic acid. It's also a good household cleaner. It's quick. If you're a hobbyist, it's nice and quick to do. If you're commercial, it's probably too time consuming, but for a hobbyist who's got less than 10 hives, this is a great way of treating your hives for varroa mites. Excuse me. Also, you don't have to go into the hive, you don't need to suit up, so you're not disturbing the bees by opening up the hive. Now the downsides of it is that you do need to wear a mask when you're doing this. The vapor can be fairly abrasive on your lungs. If you're commercial, it's not terribly quick, and also the price of these wands, they range in New Zealand from $70 to $300. In the US you can get quite a good one from between $70 to $120. This one here was $100 in New Zealand, and it's a run-of-the-mill one. Okay, so do's and don'ts. First things first, read the instructions. Follow the instructions. Wear a mask. This stuff, as I've said before, is fairly abrasive, aggressive on your lungs. So please do wear a mask when you're working with heated oxalic acid. You can touch it, it's quite neutral to touch when it's dry, but when it's heated, it is quite harsh on you. So please do take safety precautions. Don't overdose the bees. The recommended dosage is 1/4 of a teaspoon per box. So if you're running double deep broods, you use 2/4 of a teaspoon, so 1/2 teaspoon. If you're running singles, just use 1/4 of a teaspoon. Don't overdose your bees. You'll kill some of them if you're not careful. Follow the prescribed frequency. There's a few different ways of doing that, and I'll discuss that shortly. But don't be tempted to go overboard, or don't not do enough. Okay, so the dosage. If we were doing this hive here, this is just a single deep hive. By the way, all these beehives here that you're going to see tonight are actually empty. So on the lids here, I always run double deeps. So I have 2 times 1/4 of a teaspoon. So these are just old medicine bottles. What I do when I'm coming out to do it is I actually preload these, so I don't have to stuff around when I'm doing it, when I need it for real. So if I was to treat this one, I need 1/4 of a teaspoon. Dump it in there, put the lid on. And that way this here can then stay inside my shed, and it doesn't need to come out with me. I don't have to worry about spilling it. So at that rate of 1/4 of a teaspoon per box, this tub is going to last me a few years. So it's very, very cost effective in that respect. So this here is enough to do a single deep, and what's in here is enough to do a double deep. Now, frequency. There's 2 different ways of doing it. If you have a mite problem that you need to knock them down, you need to treat the hive every 3 or 4 days for 25 days. Now we say it that way because drone brood takes 24 days to hatch. So, and all the others take less than that, 21 days and 16 days. So by doing it for 24 days, because the mites traditionally, generally, frequently, hang out in the drone brood because that's the stuff that's capped for longest. Now this cannot get into the capped brood. So what it relies on is the freshly emerged bees carrying the mites out of their cell as they come out. And what it does is it breaks down the exoskeleton on the mites. So by doing it every 3 or 4 days, that means as the freshly emerged bees come out, before they've left the hive, if it's a girl bee, they become nurse bees. So the drone bees will hang out in the hive for a couple of weeks before they start flying, before they're fully fertile. We are going to have interruptions from a cat, so just bear with us. She's a 3-legged cat. She's very inquisitive. Sorry. So by doing it every 3 or 4 days, as the brood freshly emerges from the capped cells, we can belt them with this, and the mites, it'll attack the exoskeleton of the mites will fall off and die. So that's what you do if you've got a mite problem. If you are doing preventative treatment, and this is perfect for winter, you do one treatment every 30 days. So that's, and you do your big 3 or 4 days for 25 days in spring or autumn, or if you find you have a mite problem. And if you're just doing preventative maintenance or keeping them topped up, so shall we say, over winter, then you just give them a belt every 30 days. One downside, I should have mentioned it in the cons, of using this in this method is that you can't use it while the super is on, or any honey frames that you have that have been coated with this generally is considered not fit for human consumption. So if you do have some honey frames in a second box, that becomes the bees' honey for the winter. So you do need to remove the supers if you're going to treat with this stuff. Right, so let's get into it. So over here we have a flow hive 2. We're looking at the back of the flow hive because that's where you have your pest tray. So if you have a flow hive, the best way of doing it that I've found, because these wands don't fit in the entrance, they're too thick, best way I've found is to remove the pest tray and cut out a plywood board that is the same size. So when you go to do it, you remove the pest tray, slide the plywood board in, and that becomes the base for the wand to sit on. If you have an unvented base, like this one here, you have to slide it in from the front. Now on this wand here I have measured, and when the cup of the wand is sitting in the middle of the hive entrance is right at the end of that black tape. So you slide it all the way in to there. Now the downside of doing it in the front entrance like this is you are literally burning your bees' backsides, because it is 300 degrees in there, directly underneath the bum of a bee. If you have a vented base, I've got a core flute sheet here, so you pull that out, shake it and clean it. And I have a very handy husband, and he has built me a specific board. So it's got a hole in it, and then it's got a bracket to hold it. So all I do, put the wand up there, it oxidizes, it comes out through there, and and you just slide it in place. So that gets it perfectly in the right place from the side, the center of the hive. If you don't have someone who's handy to make something like that, you could put a second shelf bracket in and just do like what we've done with the flow hive, just basically have a board there and do it that way. Personally, I think it's better than going in through the front of the hive. So for this particular base here, which is what I've got at home, we've just got this, and you just slide it in. Right, so let's do a demonstration on the flow hive, shall we? The best time of day to do this is just before dark, about dusk. All the girls have come home for the night, and so the hive is full. That's what you want. You want to get as many of the bees treated as possible. So what you do, get a face cloth or a flannel, whatever you want to call it, an old cloth, dampen it down and block the entrance to the hive so they can't get out. Then you get your wand. So now the bees are secure inside the hive. They can't come out and attack you, so you don't need a bee suit. Then you simply get your treatment, tap it into the cup. We know we have to put it in up to there. You get another cloth, preferably a damp one, and block the entrance. That keeps the vapours in. You don a mask. Please envisage that I am wearing a mask. So now we use a 12-volt car battery. That's what powers this. So you plug the red plug onto the positive terminal of the battery. And you can sit like that for 10-15 minutes, nothing's going to happen. Things will only happen when you plug the black one onto the negative battery. So at the moment, if you need to suddenly go away and do something, you can. It's perfectly safe. When you're ready, connect the black one up to the negative, and that will start processing. When you do that, start your timer for 2.5 minutes. So when your timer goes off, which it will any second, disconnect one of the plugs. You can disconnect both if you want. But now we leave the wand inside the hive, and we start our timer again for 2.5 minutes. This is to ensure, because that's 300 degrees, it will still be vaporizing. There may still be powder in there, and that's to ensure that all that powder gets vaporized, and as it cools down, it'll just continue to vaporize until it's cold or there's nothing left. So we get another 2.5 minutes of it just sitting there. It's doing its thing for that 2.5 minutes. That's when you can start setting up for your next hive. So you can grab your battery. Sorry, I completely lost my words there. Grab your battery, move it over to the next position, move it to the next part of the hive. You can grab your oxalic acid ready for the next hive. You can grab some cloths if you need them, because you will need multiple cloths, some for each hive. So you just get yourself ready while that's sitting and stewing. When the timer goes off at the end of that second 2.5 minutes, remove the cloth, pull this out carefully, it will be very hot, plug the gap back up, and this time set a timer for 10 minutes. That ensures that the vapor gets all the way through the hive and cools down enough that when you remove those cloths, the bees will possibly start flying. So while that's stewing for its 10 minutes, we can be in here treating the next hive. Once the 10 minutes is up, remove the cloth, remove the board, and put your pest control tray back in. Remember to monitor that, preferably daily, to see how much mitefall you are getting. Now personally, because we're using the wand on 2 hives at the same time, so the same night, at the end of that second 2.5 minutes, just before you start the 10 minutes, that's when we remove this. But if you're only doing one hive, then at the end of that 10 minutes, just swap the boards over. If you're doing a front entrance hive like this one, where you're having to put it in directly underneath the backsides of the bees, you still have to block off the entrance. This is the only way they have of getting out. What you may find when you're vaporizing is any cracks in the hive. Imagine this has a lid, by the way. Any cracks in the hive, you will see that vapor coming out of there. Always stand upwind and wear a mask. Okay, so that was a quick introduction to using an oxalic acid vaporizing wand. Just a quick recap. Always consider safety first. Use a mask when you're working with it. Stand upwind. Also remember that wand, when it comes out, is very, very hot. It's got up to over 300 degrees Celsius, I might add, not Fahrenheit. So it is very, very hot. It's also an organic compound, so if you are an organic beekeeper or an organic farmer, it is safe to use. However, you can't use it if you have your honey supers on the hive. You will need to remove those for treatment. So you can use them if you already have a mite problem, doing an intensive knockdown of treatment every 3 or 4 days for 25 days. Or you can use it as a maintenance treatment throughout the winter of treating it every 30 days.